All right, it's the That's Enough Out of You podcast with Sean and Bill. How's it going, Sean?
Hey, buddy, how's everything going?
I'm doing pretty good, I think, unless we're under attack, War of the Worlds or something like that. There's UFOs being shot.
Watch them balloons, buddy.
Is it they're all the Chinese spy balloons? Is that what's going on, or is it?
Hey, you know what? The government's been admitting UFOs for a while. It's amazing. They'll admit that, but they won't admit that Oswald didn't do it. You know?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. There's all kinds of stuff. People are saying that there was some kind of a flashing light in where was the earthquake? I forget now.
That was over in Syria, wasn't it?
In Syria and Turkey. I don't know. People are saying there was some kind of crazy flashing light just before the earthquake in the sky. Who the heck knows? Maybe
it's like Independence Day, buddy, with Will Smith.
I guess so. Yeah. Just maybe maybe the aliens were talking about his wife or something. I don't know what's going on, but
oh boy. All right, buddy. On that note.
All right. What's our topic today, Sean? What are we talking about?
We got a good one tonight, buddy. We're going to talk about the Cleveland car bomb war from the 1970s.
All right.
I mean, this is an amazing story, Bill. A lot of people actually don't know about it, even people that follow organized crime.
Yeah.
But there was a movie called To Kill the Irishman.
Kill the Irishman. That was a good movie.
Yeah, great movie. And there's a book by the same title. Very good book. And it's just, what an incredible story. It's just craziness. It was like Chicago in the Roaring 20s all over again, buddy. But this was Cleveland. And who would think this would happen in Cleveland, Ohio, of all places?
Yeah.
But it was madness, buddy. So let's get into it. So 1970s, the late 70s, right? You had in Cleveland, the war breaks out, okay, between the Cleveland Cosa Nostra family, which is one of the 26 families that make up the National Cosa Nostra syndicate, and then two gangs that combined. And one was led by Danny Greene, who was an Irish gangster, and he was a union leader. And another was by the guy by the name of John Nardi. He was an Italian union leader, and he was a mob associate. And the interesting thing about Nardi, Bill, is he was never made. And I'm not sure why, because he really had all the credentials to be a made guy. And we're going to get into that more. But there's no way else to say it is. Greene and Nardi joined forces. And we talked before, like when an Irishman and Italian get together, like say, Buffalino and Sheeran or Whitey Bulger and the Rifleman, I mean, they could do some damage. And Greene and Nardi brought the Cleveland Cosa Nostra family to its knees. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Cleveland had to go to the New York Commission, the 5 families that make up the commission, and they had to bring in soldiers, Bill, from Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Youngstown, Ohio, New York, Kansas City, Milwaukee. And it was just unbelievable. Ended up being like 38 car bombs that went off, and it would end up leading to the commission trial in New York. People that were involved would end up testifying, and commission members would end up going to jail. So.
And this was all happening when, Sean? Was it the early 80s or?
No. Late 70s, Bill. We're talking 76, 77.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it started right around the summer 76 maybe, and it got into 77.
Okay.
It went out for like a year, maybe a little over a year, but it was absolute craziness, Yeah. And I think we got to explain, the Cleveland underworld at the time. You had that Cosa Nostra family, which is, one of the 26, and was led by a guy by the name of John Scalish. And when he dies, a guy by the name of Jack Licavoli takes over. Now, Licavoli was the wrong choice to be made boss. He wasn't respected by the soldiers, and he's going to get worked over by Greene and Nardi, And the other thing is you had the other figure we got to talk about is John Nardi, who was actually born Giovanni Narcioni. And this guy was really connected, Bill. He ran a lot of the unions. He had his own crew. He was a very powerful union official, and he was related to the Milano family, which was powerful inside Cosa Nostra. They were within the Los Angeles Cosa Nostra family. He was related to them, and he was business partners with Paul Castellano in New York. They had joint ventures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he was a very powerful guy. Now, why he wasn't made, I can't answer that. I never really got a good answer on that, why they never made him, but he always held a grudge against the leadership of the Cleveland Cosa Nostra. Licavoli and him never got along. And I think a lot of it had to do with jealousy, because Nardi was actually more effective. He was making more money. He was more powerful, more respected. And him and Licavoli never got along. The other person I want to talk about is a Jewish gangster by the name of Chandler Burns.
Yeah.
Now, he's a very powerful guy, and he was played in a movie by Christopher Walken, who did an amazing job in the movie.
That's right, yeah.
But he was kind of the Meyer Lansky of Cleveland. Very powerful. He ran a lot of loan sharking, gambling, and the other guy I want to talk about, of course, is Danny Greene, who was the Irish Union official, who's just what a charismatic character. Like, we're going to go into detail on him. I mean, honestly, he had more balls than he had brains, I think. But
and he was a big guy too, right? He was
a real big guy. Yeah, real big guy. And the last figure that we need to tell before we get into the story is a police sergeant by the name of Ed Kovac. He was a Polish cop, and he would end up having kind of a respect in a relationship with Greene. He would end up taking care of his son later to make sure he didn't get involved in crime. But he went after Greene. He was the cop trying to stop this war.
Right. Yeah.
But he had an interesting relationship with Greene. He lived only a block away from him. Their kids went to school together. Their kids were friends. They were in sports together, the kids. So, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic that Kovac has. And he ended up kind of trying to, end the war, stop the war. And he's an interesting figure in this whole thing. So how in the world did this thing start, Billy? So Danny Greene, like I said, this guy had balls, no matter what you think of him. I mean, he was really Irish. He was proud of being Irish. He thought of himself like a Celtic warrior. Like the Celts believed that, after death, they would join the gods that they worshiped. And I really think part of this guy actually believed that, because he's seen himself as a Celtic warrior. And he always said that he had St. Patrick on his side. And he would say that, they couldn't kill me because I have St. Patrick on my side. And there was 20 attempts on this guy's life, Bill. And every time he would get, they would be unsuccessful. And he would end up taunting the mob every single time, the Cleveland Cosa Nostra family. He would be standing out there with no shirt. Like you said, he was a big, muscular guy. And he'd stand there with a Celtic cross on, and his arms would be folded, and he'd be calling the mob maggots and saying, hey, these guys know where I am. I'm not hiding from anybody. And he was a legend in the neighborhood in Cleveland there, the Collinwood neighborhood. They would end up, they made songs about him. They wrote songs and ballads about him. They'd be singing in the bars. And the people really respected him in that neighborhood because he took care of the neighborhood. He would end up giving turkeys out on Thanksgiving, like a lot of these guys do, Bill,
Right. But they ingratiate themselves to the neighborhood, just, so that so nobody goes to the cops.
Yeah. And also, people in the neighborhood would tell him, if a strange cars in the neighborhood or somebody, so he would always have lookouts everywhere. Right. And that's the reason why a lot of these guys do stuff like that. But he would end up getting indicted for embezzlement and racketeering while he was running the union. And he was fined and he was barred from working in the unions, but he didn't serve any jail time, Bill, which has a lot of people suspicious. And there's rumors, this is where the rumors start, that he was an FBI informant. I never really was able to find out whether he was an FBI informant or not. Personally, I don't think he was. I think a lot of people, just because he didn't do any jail time, they suspected that. But he forms a small gang, a tough crew of Irish gangsters they call the Celtic Club. And they start collecting payments for the Jewish gangster, Chandler Burns. And Chandler Burns really was the head of the Jewish mob in Cleveland. And he worked closely with the Cosa Nostra nationwide, not just in Cleveland. He certainly was partners with Licavoli, but he had ties back to New York, and he was close to Tony Salerno, Fat Tony Salerno.
And the Gambinos too, right? Wasn't he?
He was close to the Gambinos. He was close, and this is the interesting dynamic because both him and Nardi were close to Paul Castellano, and yet Licavoli is in a war with Nardi. You know, so it's just interesting. But again, Bill, what does it come down to with these guys? Money. If they can make money, they're gonna, be friends with whoever can make them the most money.
That's right. Exactly.
So Greene also becomes associates with two more Cosa Nostra associates that weren't made guys, but they were powerful, by the name of Frank Brancato and Mike Fratto. And these two guys basically ran the garbage pickups and the waste disposal in the city. And Greene and his crew go into business with them as well as with Shonda Burns. And Greene and Fratto end up becoming best of friends. And Fratto in the movie, Bill, is played by Steve Sciarippa, who played Bacala in The Sopranos.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So they become really good friends. As a matter of fact, they name their kids after each other. I mean, but like anything with these guys, they have a bad falling out. And the thing is, Fratto, if you could believe this, thought that Greene was too violent, and he wanted to calm him down. And he told him to tone it down. And they have a bad falling out. So one day, Sergeant Kovac is in the police station, and he's sitting there doing paperwork, and all of a sudden the police station's rocked by a bomb, Bill. And it's the car bomb goes off, and it's basically right across from the police station. If you can imagine the balls on this.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was Mike Fratto's car, but it wasn't his body that they found at the scene. It was a guy by the name of Art Sneppinger. Sneppinger was a Greene associate, okay? And Greene ordered the Mike Fratto attempted hit, but the bomb went off prematurely. So Sneppinger ends up getting killed in this. And what happens is Fratto retaliates, and he shoots at Danny Greene while Danny Greene's jogging. And of course, he misses him. And the legend starts to grow. The next day, Fratto's body is found in his car, and he was shot in the head. Now, car was found a block by the police station. Like, that's really like gutsy to put it that close to the police. I mean, you're basically taunting them.
Yeah.
And the next day, a sniper shoots at Danny Greene again while he's jogging. This guy should be careful while he's jogging. And he misses. And Danny Greene pulls out a gun, and he chases after him. The sniper runs away. And all of a sudden, the legend now is really growing of Danny Greene. And John Nardi's taking notice of this, because John Nardi's sitting back, and his plan, he really wants to take over the Cosa Nostra in Cleveland. And he's taking notice of what Greene is doing here. So, Greene and Kovac, they go on with this relationship, like, they're showing up together at sporting events because their sons are playing, their sons are friends. And it's just such a strange relationship. And the whole time Kovac is investigating Greene, but he's actually trying to talk him out to get out of this life. And what ends up happening is Greene doesn't want any part of that. He doesn't want to go back to work in the union job or anything else. He's making money, and he wants to actually expand. So he borrows money from Shonda Burns. Now, the problem with this is Shonda Burns is working really for Fat Tony Salerno. So the money's coming from Fat Tony Salerno in New York. So Salerno gives Burns the money to give to Greene, and Greene opens up this bar. And what ends up happening is there's this nightclub, and they end up losing all the money. Okay. Because the reason they did this is Burns had he had a black gangster that was working for him, that he told Greene he wanted him to work as a bouncer in the bar, and Greene didn't want him there. And he ended up taking him on Burns' recommendation, and the guy screwed up, and they end up losing all this money. And now you got a problem, because it's Tony Salerno's money in New York. So Greene is blaming Burns. Burns is blaming Greene. He's saying, you got to pay it. And Greene is saying, I'm not paying that money. You're the guy that wanted me to hire this idiot. So this is on you. So now Fat Tony tells Burns he's got to fix this. And by fixing that, he's got to get that money from Greene. So what ends up happening is Danny Greene starts going on and he starts muscling in on the mob vending machine businesses. And him and his crew, they're muscling right in. And now John Nardi's really taking notice. And he's got his own problems with Cosa Nostra in Cleveland. And he sees Greene, he sees this opportunity, for him to join forces with Danny Greene and take out the leadership in Cleveland, the Cosa Nostra. So what happens is, because of this beef with Burns and Greene over Tony Salerno's money, Burns ends up putting a contract on the head of Danny Greene. And Nardi finds out about it, and he goes and warns Greene about it. And there's a scene in the movie, Bill, I think you remember, Nardi was played by the great Vince D'Onofrio.
Right, yeah.
And he says, hey, you should be proud. There's, $25,000 on the head on your head, Danny Greene. Right. That's something to be proud of.
Right.
And so after Nardi tells him that, Greene has one choice, and he's going to take out Shonda Burns. So Shonda Burns is drinking in a bar, and he leaves, and he starts his car, and a car bomb goes off, Bill. Now, there was a Catholic church right down the street from the bar, and they were in mass at the time. The windows got blown out of the church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, Bill, Burns was blowing several feet out of the car, and he was blown in half.
Oh.
His legs were found 50 feet away from the car. They found pieces of him, Bill, up on part of the two-story building, on the top of this two-story building. The bomb that Danny Greene used was C4, if you want to talk about overkill.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And Sergeant Kovac understood quickly when this happened that Danny Greene was behind that, because earlier he had warned Danny Greene that, the mob was after him, that Shonda Burns was after him over this thing with Tony Salerno. And Greene said to him, he said, listen, he says, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So Kovac understood that Greene took Burns out, but he didn't have any evidence of it. Now the Cosa Nostra in Cleveland has to retaliate. They have no choice, because Burns is one of their guys. And like I said, Greene is muscling in on the vending machines. And now Nardi is getting involved with Greene. And they're really muscling in on a lot of the rackets there. So what does the LCN do? They put a hit on Danny Greene. So Kovac is sitting there. And remember, he only lives like a block away from Greene. And he's having breakfast one day with his family there. He's drinking his coffee. And he hears two loud explosions, Bill. Or actually, one was very loud, one not so loud. And as soon as he heard the explosions, he looked, he turned to his wife and he said to her, he said, Danny Greene is dead. But he wasn't dead, Bill.
Yeah.
The mob blew up his house.
Oh,
okay. They planted a bomb on the back porch, and that didn't fully detonate. That was the more quiet explosion. Then they threw a bomb through the front window, through the kitchen window. Okay, that bomb exploded and it blew up the whole front side of the house. Oh. Now, Greene was upstairs with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend was on the bed, and he was in the front part of the bedroom, standing in the doorway, and that part of the house actually imploded, and he came right down to the ground level. But he walked away with just a couple of scrapes and bruises. Okay, the entire house, though, ended up being demolished. It completely caved in.
Yeah.
His girlfriend was fine, but the two dogs that they had escaped, but they had 4 cats that were killed. But the thing is, I think the only thing he might have had a broken rib, if you could believe that. That was all that happened. But the next day, the house is in total rumble, Bill.
Right.
It's torn down, and it's there. And Danny Greene puts up a big sign, and he said, the future home of the Celtic Club. And there he is, standing in front of his house with a wife beater T-shirt. And he's like flexing his arms, and he's standing there with the Celtic cross, and he's taunting them. He said, listen, He says, you can't kill me. I got St. Patrick on my side. If these maggots want to come after me, you know where I am.
Right.
And now, Bill, what's happening now is the Cleveland Cosa Nostra family is becoming an embarrassment to nationwide. So Salerno and these guys are in New York, and they're not happy with what's going on. So Greene and Nardi end up going on the offensive, though. And they start to really target all the mob vending machine businesses really bad. And one of the biggest vending machine business owners in Cleveland was a guy by the name of John Conte. And Greene and Nardi end up beating this guy to death, Bill. Okay, they take him back to Greene's trailer, and they beat him with their fists, but they completely beat him to a pulp until he ends up dying.
Yeah.
And then they leave him against a tree right by the Cleveland Cosa Nostra clubhouse. So they're taunting him again. So now Licavoli has a choice. He's getting pushed by his underboss, a guy by the name of Leo Lips Mercieri. Now, Mercieri is a important figure. He's a feared figure. He probably should have been the boss over Licavoli, but Licavoli tries to make peace. He doesn't really want a war because I think he really understands that he can't win this war unless he goes to New York and other families, and then he's going to be under their thumb. So what he ends up doing is he tries to make peace with John Nardi, and he tells him, listen, he says, if you take out Danny Greene, he said, I'll make sure you become a made guy, and we'll take you into the family. And Nardi basically, he tells him he's not going to betray Danny Greene. He says they're going to take everybody out. He actually says this to Licavoli. He says, I'm going to give you a chance to retire. You can leave, go down to Florida, whatever you want to do, and you leave everything to us, and I won't kill you. That's what Nardi tells him. So now Licavoli says, okay, they want war, they got it. So he goes to one of the most fierce soldiers in Cleveland, was a guy by the name of Eugene the Animal Casilio, okay? And and Licavoli tells him to lead the war against Greene and Nardi. So a couple more attempted attacks on Greene and Nardi, and the Animal misses. And the legends keeps growing of Danny Greene. So the next thing is the Animals goes back to his house, Bill, and he's walking up the stairs. And what do you think happens? Bomb goes off. Okay. And it explodes. They put a bomb underneath this porch, and it was a nail bomb.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the nails ripped into the intestines in the stomach of the animal. Now he ended up surviving. Okay. Believe it or not, he survived, but he was useless after that. He was basically crippled. And he fled to Florida, and he basically tells Licavoli, listen, this is your problem. You handle it. I'm done. And he goes down to Florida. So now Greene and Nardi basically took out the number one soldier, the most feared soldier in the Cleveland Cosa Nostra. Then the underboss, Leo Lips Mercieri, disappears. And they found his car, and in his car was his golf clubs, and there was blood all over it. What happened is Nardi and Greene kidnapped him, and they beat him to death with his own golf clubs.
Oh my God.
So now, Bill, they killed the underboss of the family. So I've never seen this ever. I don't know about you. If you ever heard of like an underboss, somebody that high up getting killed by outsiders. You know, I never read about this happening anywhere else in the history of Cosa Nostra in the United States.
Usually you can't get to those guys. It's impossible.
No. But they killed the underboss. So now, you know, what's happened now is New York is really onto it. Like New York is really nervous about what's going on. They don't have any confidence that Cleveland could handle this situation. And Sergeant Kovacs is worried too, because the war is really ramping up now. So he puts his officers out there on the street, and they pick up two of Greene's associates, Keith Wrightson and Kevin McTaggart. And Bill,
and Sean, and innocent people are getting killed too, right? I mean,
well, we're going to get into that. There was people that were like minor injuries and stuff, but I'm only aware of one actual casualty of innocent, but that I'm going to get to. But I know there was people that was injured, but only one person was killed that I believe that was not involved, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But anyway, they pick up these guys, Bill. They're cruising around Cleveland in a car made to look like an undercover cop car. Okay. And they had all kind of weapons, and they had a hit list. And on the hit list was Cosa Nostra members from the Cleveland family. And within a couple of days, a couple of people on that list would end up being found shot to death. So this is what's going on now. And the Cleveland Cosa Nostra family is doing the same thing. They got guys sent out there on the street. They're driving around in their car, hunting members of the Green Nardi crew. So you got an all-out mob war in Cleveland, you know, and you got really one Polish cop that's trying to stop this whole thing.
Right.
And what happens is, interesting, you know, I think there had to be a conversation in the commission if they wanted to go in the direction of, hey, maybe we should side with Nardi and Greene. I think that conversation had to happen. That's just speculation on my part, but I think it's something.
Why do you
think? Because you know what, Bill, I think that they had to see the damage that these guys were doing. And they also had to see that the money they were making, because remember, Bill, they're taking over all these vending machines. They're basically, Nardi's running most of the unions there. These guys are making more money than the Cosa Nostra family.
Yeah.
So at some point, you know, it's all about money. But at some point, I think maybe they decided to go the other direction, because I think they were a little bit afraid of what would happen if these guys actually did, you know, take control and take the power. Would they try to expand beyond Cleveland? I think that was probably, you know, the difference.
But I think couldn't they have also been, because Greene was like he was a figure. He was a public, like people knew about him.
Oh, everybody knew about him in town. Yeah.
So that's probably another reason why they would not have wanted to side with him.
That's true. That's true. And the other thing is, Bill, he was taunting them. You know, the way he was taunting them, I mean, he was making, you know, a major enemy. And I think, you know, that's the difference, I think, with Danny Greene and say, like, other Irish and Jewish gangsters like Jimmy Coonan and Whitey Bulger and Meyer Lansky. Like, those guys understand that, hey, we could protect our neighborhood. We might be able to get into a beef with the local family, but we don't want to take on the entire Cosa Nostra nationwide, because you're going to be outnumbered.
Right.
And that's where I think Coonan and Whitey Bulger especially understand that, hey, it's better to have a relationship with these guys nationwide than try to take them on.
Right.
And this is what happens, is the full force of the national American Cosa Nostra come down on Nardi and Greene. And as tough as these two guys were, there's just no way they could take on all these guys, because now you got people coming in from New York, you got Chicago involved, you got Kansas City, Los Angeles. And it's not like, Bill, with the Cleveland family, they know who the players are. They know where they live. They can put them on a hit list, their address, and send guys out after them. They don't know who these guys are that's coming after them.
Yeah.
Okay. So now they bring in guys like Jimmy the Weasel Fradiano from Los Angeles, who would end up testifying in the commission trial. And he would also end up testifying against Russell Buffalino. Okay. Now, one side note here, Bill, if you don't want a guy to rat, it's probably not a good idea to name him the Weasel, right?
Well, is that why he got that name?
I don't, well, he wasn't a rat when they named him.
Right.
I don't know. But another guy they brought in is a guy by the name of Ray Ferrito from Erie, Pennsylvania. They're bringing a guy, Ron Carabia, from Youngstown, Ohio. And, you know, there's local members of Cosa Nostra too, Butchie Cisternerno and Ali Calabrese. Okay. And they go after Nardi and Greene, and they try to machine gun him down in a restaurant. But again, they miss. And again, the legend starts to grow even more with Danny Greene. So here's where the innocent person gets killed, Bill. What happens next is Ali Calabrese lends his car to his neighbor. Okay. His neighbor has nothing to do with this. He's totally innocent bystander. I guess his car broke down. He lends him his car. The poor guy's driving down the street. Next thing you know, a bomb goes off, blows him up, kills him.
God.
Now, that's an innocent guy, had nothing to do with anything. Another side note, Bill, probably if a mob guy lends you his car, probably a good idea to probably not take it. You know, I mean, nothing good is going to come out of that.
Right.
You know, but anyway, Now an innocent person's got killed. And like you said before, I don't know. I know there was minor injuries, Bill, but this is the only, if you could believe it, the only death that I know of that was an innocent person. And all these bombs going off, like 38 bombs, and all these shootings and all the violence that's going around, the guys driving around looking for other gangsters and shootouts in restaurants. This is the only death that I could find that was an innocent bystander.
Yeah.
So that's amazing in itself.
Well, it sounds like their aim wasn't that good to begin with. So,
well, some of these guys, I mean, they missed Greene over 20 times, but there's 20 some attempts on his life.
It's like Rasputin.
But and there's bombs going off all over the city. It's actually, I mean, it's like the Roaring 20s in Chicago. I mean, this is nuts. And why do they use car bombs, Bill? Because that's not something that organized crime uses.
No.
You know, I think it started because I think Greene, being that he was so Irish, he saw what the Irish Republican Army was doing with car bombs. And I think he started it. And then I think the Italians just retaliated with car bombs. And that's how I think they got into this car bomb war. That's speculation on my part. I don't know how, but I just know, like, following organized crime doesn't happen in any other city that I'm aware of.
Well, they did try to kill
I know what you're going to say.
Casino. Yeah.
Who? Frank DeChico. They tried to kill Frank DeChico. Is that what you're talking about?
No, they tried to kill the guy.
Oh, you're talking about Frank Lefty Rosenthal.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. They did use a car bomb then, and they also, when they tried to, Frank DeChico got killed. He was Gotti's consigliere.
Right.
When the Cingigante ordered that hit.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess they do use it, but it is rare, though, Bill. It is rare, especially to have 38 in one city.
Right. Well, special occasions they use it.
Yeah, I guess. But anyway, what ends up happening is the full force of Cosa Nostra now is on Nardi and Greene. Okay, and they're coming from all parts of the country, and they end up getting John Nardi. They blow him up in a car bomb. Okay, and he's laying there, he's bleeding out. And like as you said, Bill, these guys, Nardi and Greene, start to become public figures. Local media's following them around.
Right.
There happened to be a reporter that was following Nardi around when the car bomb went off. And when Nardi's laying there bleeding out, the reporter comes over to him, and Nardi's still alive, and he says, "Tell those sons of bitches it didn't even hurt." And that was his last words.
Jeez.
Yeah. So what happens now is Greene starts to go on the offensive again, but he doesn't have Nardi now. And the mob decides that the way we're going to do this is we're going to bug Danny Greene's house. And what they do is they bug his phone, and he ends up making a call to the dentist. And these Irish gangsters should be concerned about making calls to the dentist, because this is how they got Whitey Bulger too, with his girlfriend making calls to the dentist. But he ends up making an appointment. And what happens is the mob understands that we don't want to plant a bomb on Greene's car, because he's checking underneath the hood, he's checking underneath the car. We're not going to be successful if we do that. So what they did is they rigged up another car filled with explosives. And when Greene goes to the dentist, he goes inside, the mob comes with their car, and they park it right next to Greene. Okay. And when Greene comes out, they detonate it remotely, and the car bomb goes off. It just explodes and just blows. Like Danny Greene turned his back on the car, and it actually like blew his back right out. I mean, just yeah. He was found like underneath a couple cars away. He was found underneath one of the cars, and that was the end. Danny Greene was dead. But here's what happened, Bill. In the book, they talk about, this was what Danny Greene would say, the luck of the Irish, because the guy who blew him up was a guy by the name of Ray Ferrito that I said came in from Erie, Pennsylvania. They brought in, he built the bomb and the remote detonator. And when he's leaving the scene, okay, he's in a van, and they take off too fast, and they almost hit this lady that's coming into the parking lot. And the lady gets a really good look at Ray Ferrita. And of all the things in the world this lady could be, Bill, she's an artist.
Oh,
so yeah. So Sergeant Kovacs takes her in as a witness, taking her statement down, and he says to her, "Lady, could you identify the man who you seen fleeing the scene?" And she said, well, I could do better than that. She said, I could draw him for you.
Yeah.
So she draws him a picture and gives it to Sergeant Kovacs. And Kovacs takes one look at it and he said, that's Ray Farida.
Yeah.
So he brings in Ray Farida and he starts singing like a canary as soon as he comes in. And then that leads him to the underboss that took over for Leo Lips. And that was a guy by the name of Angelo Leonardo. They take him in. He starts ratting. Okay. He starts talking about Tony Salerno, which ends up being used in the commission trial in New York. And then they bring in Jimmy the Weasel Fradiano. He starts ratting. So these guys basically start tearing apart the Cleveland Cosa Nostra, whatever's left. Licavoli ends up going to prison. Salerno in New York ends up going to prison. So in the end, the war with Danny Greene and John Nardi, they did take both of them out, but it ended up destroying the mafia in Cleveland, and it ended up destroying them on a national level too, you know? So just an amazing story, Bill. And whatever you think of Danny Greene, I mean, he was a gangster. He did kill people. So I'm not trying to glorify him by any means, but.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because it's been a while since I've seen the movie. But I do remember, the movie sort of portraying him not really as, I guess, as ruthless as he really was.
Yeah, you're right. The movie did try to glorify him, Bill.
Yeah.
When you read the book, you realize how vicious he was.
Yeah.
He was a gangster. There's no making excuses for him. So yeah, I mean, he was definitely, a hardcore gangster, but you're right. The movie downplayed it a lot. And they did try to glorify him. They tried to make him the hero of the story. And there's no heroes of the story. But no. What I'm saying is the guy had guts. You have to give him that. And he might have had more balls than brains because,
right.
Like I said, he didn't have that cunning that Jimmy Coonan and the Westies had and Whitey Bulger had and some of these other guys where they could see, hey, it makes no sense whatsoever to take on the full force of the Cosa Nostra because there's too many guys. I mean, right. New York had, like at the height of Cosa Nostra, Bill, I think they had like 11,000 made men nationwide,
wow.
Not counting associates. And half of them, like 5,000 were in New York. And then you get another like maybe 1,800 in Chicago. And when you're trying to take that on, it's impossible, and they could pull guys from Los Angeles. They could pull guys from Kansas City.
Yeah.
Don't know what these guys look like. They're coming in from all over. And it got too much. But again, I think the mob really made a mistake when they didn't make John Nardi made man. And he probably should have been a boss at some point. And I think that was the mistake because, once he had this vendetta against the local Cosa Nostra, no matter how much money he was making and how many deals he was making, it just, he wanted that respect of being a made guy and he wasn't given it. So he decided to go to war. And the other thing I think you have to realize, Bill, is it kind of shows you about Big Polly Castellano in New York, where, they always called him the boss of bosses after he took over for Carlo Gambino.
Right.
But did he really have the respect of the other bosses on the commission? Because remember, he's partners with Nardi.
Right.
And Salerno and these guys are against Nardi and Greene. They end up going to war. And they didn't really care what Castellano said. So I think that was another interesting dynamic in this whole thing.
Yeah, we'll have to do a show on the Gambinos and Castellano because
we'll definitely have to.
Clearly, he obviously once Gotti took him out, they immediately, I mean, if they didn't respect or if they did respect him, if he was a respected boss, they would have retaliated against Gotti. Instead, they made
actually the only person that did retaliate, Bill, is Chin Gigante at the Genovese family. Chin Gigante was the only one that was upset about that.
Yeah.
And the reason, I don't think it was that he respected Castellano. I think he just respected the rules that to take out a boss at a commission, you have to get a full commission okay, and right. Gotti didn't do that.
Right.
So that's why I think Chin Gigante went after Gotti, but then they end up making peace, and that didn't last very long. But yeah, we could do a show on that, buddy. That'd be an interesting topic.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But Castellano lost control of that family. Like he couldn't control the Westies. he couldn't control Roy DeMeo, and he couldn't control Gotti. And he just didn't have the respect. But
Plus,
getting
the
back
FBI
to
bugged his house.
they bugged his house, the White House, they called it.
Right. They caught him with his maid.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah. We'll do a show on that, buddy. But this was a good episode. This was interesting, just an amazing story that you really don't hear a lot. Even the movie was kind of downplayed, and it's a really good movie. Paul Sorvino's in it. There's a great line in it. Paul Sorvino actually plays Fat Tony Salerno, and the guy that plays Licavoli says to him, he says, we tried everything. He said, and Salerno goes, he's one guy, you can't kill him. And he said, we shot him, we blew him up, he just won't die. But it's a really good movie. It's really underrated. But I think, like you said, Bill, it kind of downplays how vicious Danny Greene was. And even John Nardi's not. D'Onofrio does a great job, as always. He's a tremendous actor, but he downplayed how smart and how vicious Nardi was too,
Yeah. So Ray Stevenson is the guy who played Danny Greene in the movie. I don't know him from anything else.
Oh, he was in a couple things, Bill. He was in different things. I think he's Irish born, I think.
Yeah.
Stevenson, but he's a good actor. He was in, I got to think off the top of my head, I can't think. But he's in a lot of different things. He's definitely a good actor, though. He played the role pretty good, but I would have liked to see him more based on the book, because when you read the book, you really get an insight to how vicious Nardi and Greene were.
Yeah.
Because they took down the family. There's no other way to say that. They took the Cosa Nostra Cleveland family they brought it to its knees. I mean, they killed the underboss. Like I said, that's never happened, by an outside crew in the 100 years of Cosa Nostra.
Right. Yeah.
And they took out the number one soldier. There were car bombs going off. They're blowing up cars right by the police station. They're killing people, leaving the bodies by the police station. I mean, they just had no fear whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's just an amazing story, buddy.
I'm looking at the cast list for Robert Davi.
He's a good actor.
He's terrific. If you don't know who Robert Davi is, if you second you see his face, you know who he is.
He was in one James Bond movie. He played a Latin American or Latin drug dealer.
Yeah. Like you said, Steve Sciarippa, Paul Sorvino, also Tony Darrow, who was in Goodfellas and in The Sopranos too. He was in that. He played.
Now, what does he play?
Plays Mikey Menderolo.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That might be a composite character. I'm not
Probably,
sure. Yeah. Because you know how this is, Bill. They put it together, composite.
Yeah.
Because you can't get everybody in that, played a role. But
right.
Just a tremendous story, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, good job. Really good. I enjoyed this. All right. Well, we'll wrap up this episode, but great episode and a lot more good stuff coming up. And Sean, at some point we'll have to get a show where we do some feedback, because we've been getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we have that,
from listeners. So we'll set aside some time.
We'll have to do a whole show just questions and comments, Bill.
Yeah.
We try to get to them, but it's possible to get to all of them, buddy. We'll have to do a whole show.
Yeah, we're just getting a ton of feedback, which is fantastic.
It's awesome, yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, as we record this is Super Bowl Sunday. We're getting close to the Super Bowl starting. So, if you, I don't know, you said you don't follow football. Maybe do you watch the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch the Super Bowl, Bill, but I'm not a big NFL guy. I'm a college guy, buddy. Yeah. I love college football, and I said we're going to have that NIL episode coming up. Because
looking forward to that.
Affected college football, so I'm gonna have that. But I'll watch the Super Bowl. I mean, the postseason I watch a little bit, but I'm a college guy, buddy.
Oh, I know. All right, well, I'm gonna go make my wings and my pizza rolls. That's for me. That's every Super Bowl. I always have wings and pizza. Those little pizza rolls.
And watch out for them car bombs, buddy.
Yeah. I'll definitely be looking under my hood. All right. Good episode.
All right, buddy.
All right. That's enough out of you.
Good night, everybody.